So glad to be back again. Thank you so much, Mark. It's always fun to have an afternoon conversation with you and your audience. My name is Sam Kadi. I'm a writer, director, producer, and I came to the States back in 2000. So I've been here about 24 years, and I am based in Santa Barbara, California, and I love making movies that they are relevant, that resonate with the people.
As we look at the fall of the Assad regime, how do you envision the role of Syrian filmmakers in reconstructing a national identity and cultural heritage through filmmaking?
I think Syrian filmmakers, have played an essential role actually in the recent 10 years, let's say. I think it took a lot of young filmmakers back then, all the way to 2011 when the revolution started, the uprising, even though the Western media loved to call it civil war, which I am totally opposed to that, to that title. Uh, they, I think, learned in the very few years the power of media and the power of cinema and the power of image. So it took them a few years to manage to start learning the process and putting some films together. Uh, I think our role right now is essential as well, as we are rebuilding this country, planning to rebuild this country because for the people who are listening right now or watching, I was born in Aleppo, Syria, so this matters to me a lot. So I think right now one of the most important jobs that we could do as filmmakers is setting the records and the narratives right.
Mm.
And I think we need to come together and actually tell the people who the Syrians are, what their hopes and dreams were and are, and uh, the misleading information that been fed through so many channels in the past. I think this is something we need to work on as filmmakers, as we right now have a land called Syria with over 22 million people, that they will be, dying for films like this, to watch films inside Syria. One of the films I made, Little Gandhi, never screened in Syria. So we have the fans, we have the grassroots, we have I think the land where we could play these movies, and we're not fearful anymore, and we're not afraid for our lives or every other Syrian filmmaker who lives inside to make these films. And I think we need to set the records, straight. As I said, we need to make sure that we remind people that this is from the ground up revolution. That revolution was a fight for freedom and dignity, and it was not a fight for Assad regime against terrorism.
So there was a lot in there. I got several questions, but I want to start with one. In the light of these political changes, what stories do you believe are imperative to tell now, and how could they be used to foster healing and unity?
That's a very important question. Justice fosters healing.
Mm,
Cinema will promote it.
mm.
Cinema will encourage it. But justice needs to take place. And I think the story that I feel we need to tell right now are the positive stories, the stories that bring us together, the stories that remind us and remind the world that we are united, the stories that remind everybody who are the Syrians. I would love to see people that look like me on the screen.
Uh,
I don't want scary people on the screen anymore. I don't want every other film to be about ISIS or
Mm.
terrorists. I don't want action films about Syria. I want to tell the real story of the Syrian people, the educated people who marched the streets back in 2011, including the subject matter of my film Little Gandhi Giyat Matar, the peace activist who was killed by the Assad regime when he was only 25 years old. I need the stories that preserve the legacy of our heroes so they're not forgotten. So their families don't think that we forgot about them. We need stories that actually encourage rebuilding this country. And again, remind all of us that we are one and we're in it together. And right now, the picture is so clear about who is the criminal and who is the victim.
One of the things I'm reminded of is that Syria is a very ancient ancient country.
True.
And the stories have been told for literally thousands of years. And I'm curious, could you give us a sense of the Syrian style of storytelling? Because filming is storytelling. We know that. That's the mechanism we do it. But is there a special bit? I'm going to confess my ignorance of understanding what makes a story particularly Syrian.
Showing delicious food on the table, sense of humor, uh,
Uh-huh.
honest and truthful stories, simple people. I mean, for people that might not know Syria, I mean, Syria is the oldest country in the world.
Yep.
Damascus is the oldest capital in the world. I was fortunate enough, and it's very emotional to me now speaking about Aleppo, where I was born, because it's by UNESCO, it's like the oldest, city in the entire, world. And I was born there.
Yeah.
And I am so proud to say that I am proud of being there.
Yeah.
And now we came full circle and people
Mm.
are not afraid of us anymore because we are the people. Even though I left 24 years ago, but my eyes always on Syria because this is my homeland. I mean,
Sure.
despite being an American citizen, and I love this country, I made movies for this country, appreciating this country. So if we go back as far as the uh, Syrian film or Syrian cinema. And again, when I talk about Syria, I'm talking about the land of the first church ever existed. I'm talking about the land of the very first alphabet that was found, inaugurate. I'm talking about the land of the very first musical notes. I'm talking about the land of the only town in the entire world that still speaks the language of Jesus. I
Mm.
mean, this is how old is this country. It's a beautiful country. And you think this is so cinematic. This
Mm.
is so incredible, right? But unfortunately, for oppressive regimes and dictators, cinema is a dangerous thing. Cinema travels. TV don't travel. They're not so afraid of TV. They are afraid of cinema because cinema travels. Cinema is beloved by the people around the world globally and capture the attention of everyone. A well-made film is a ticking bomb. A
Mm.
well-made film is a ticking bomb for them, and they did not want it. So for 53 years since Assad, the dad, took over,
Yeah.
cinema production almost stopped in Syria, even though the very first film was made in Syria goes back to 1927.
Ah.
And it's a silent film. And that was actually the only film in the Middle East that was before that. It was an Egyptian film. And that was the second film in the entire Arab world. So we were up there and right there, as far as cinema. And in the 60s, we have the cinema flourished in Syria. Syria was in a very good shape back then, but again, when Assad took over and made actually degraded cinema, degraded theaters, and then decided to take over and create propaganda, movies that are focused only on the vision of the regime. And they were, I mean, far and few, in between. I mean, a couple of films a year or something, but they are, controlled by the government. And basically, there was no industry at all, and nobody goes to theater. And maybe a quick story here, you might, get a kick out of it. When I was young, I used to travel once a month for 5 hours to watch a good movie. I used to travel, take the bus from Aleppo to Damascus, because at that time there was only one theater inside a 5 stars hotel in the downtown Damascus that used to bring new films. So I will travel 5 hours each
How old
way.
were you?
I was like, 15. And I will travel like 5 hours, builds basically 10 hours, kind of like travel to watch 2 hours movie. And I was so happy. And it just meant a lot to me. It's a day trip, but they made it hard to access art. They made it hard to become an artist. They made it hard to actually let your vision go far and beyond.
So two questions. One is, I know when you wanted to become a filmmaker. I want to save that story for a second.
Sure.
When did you become an activist?
Mm. Well, I'm a rebel since I was young. I think since I
Okay.
wasn't doing theater in Syria, because I started my career as a playwright and a stage actor and director while I was in engineering school. So it's just a hobby of mine that developed out of nowhere because someone encouraged me to do it, and encouraged this in me. And he found out about me before I found out about myself. And he
Uh,
said, listen, just forget about this engineering nonsense you're doing. Just go become an artist or a director or whatever, or an actor. And I followed his advice, and this is where we are. The rest is, is a story, is a history. Uh, so I think just having the ability and the platform to say what you feel you want to say, it was exhilarating for me since I was young. So even though my plays used to be censored, I tried to be very clever in addressing what I wanted to address.
mm,
And I've been called when I was young, when I was doing theater in Syria, I've been called to the by the government multiple times to be interrogated about what did you mean, of this in the script. And I remember, here is another actually nugget for you, another story. We were doing a poster for a play back in Aleppo, and you submit basically in writing what are you trying to do with the poster, because I want to go into the public and take a photo and make something out of it. And so definitely I tried to, mislead them with what I wanted to do. And they gave me the okay. I went, and I remember the picture was, I think the entire group that, the actors, and we're all dressed in different uniforms, doctors, engineers, you can tell from the picture. And actually behind us was a dumpster on fire, you know, and I said, welcome in,
ooh,
kind of thing. And we took that poster, and that was the poster that actually was, it spread it all over town as a commercial for for the play. And definitely the next day I was called in. I was like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? And I tried to justify what I did. I tried to play dumb. But anyway, that kind of like takes you back. Definitely, I got myself in trouble, but managed to get out of it. But just to go back to that story, to that thing, I think what ignited or reignited this in me when the Syrian revolution and the uprising started. I went against every advice that I got from my managers, from my agents here in the state, and we're talking, now years after I left Syria, and I studied in filmmaking here, and I became a director, and they did not want me to make a movie about Syria because it was so political. At that time, people were divided, politicians were divided, and they did not know, like my reps, they did not know what side do I need to be on,
Mm,
or do they need me to be on. And I said, no, I know what side I am on. I will be on the right side of history no matter what. I do not care, and I need to do something about these people over there. And I started actually by making short films. I made a short film all the way back in 2011. I just put it online. I didn't want anything. Even my name wasn't on it. I mean, it used to be called SOS Siege on Syria. It's a 10 minutes movie. Then I made another silent film called Veto in 2012. Talks about every single veto that took place between 2011 and end of 2012, and how that actually impacted the decision and the politics in the region negatively. And then, I went on to do Little Gandhi. So I think it's possibly it's in me. I mean, as far as being, I wouldn't call myself activist. I wouldn't call myself. I mean, people sometimes call me activist. I just want to make stories that they actually resonate, and they're topical, and definitely I'm passionate about certain subjects, and I'm gonna go and try to tell them and try to become that fearless, director. But I don't know if I call myself activist.
Sam, thank you so much for spending this time with the TEDx Santa Barbara audience, and we'll look forward to seeing your next film.
Thank you so much for having me.